Today we're going after brown trout, and I've got a rig set up with two flies. The bottom fly is a balanced leech, and then a foot and a half up from that I have a chironomid size 14, and I'm going to put that on under an indicator, which I haven't put on yet. I'm currently in about 5 feet of water, so I'm going to set this up so it's running 3.5 feet or so. Okay. I'll also be throughout the day kind of talking about fishing a lake that you're new to. This is the first time I've ever fished this lake, but there's some strategies that'll help, and we'll go through all of that. What makes for a good fishing lake and where you should concentrate your efforts. All right, indicator is on. Now, as I cruise around this lake, I'm going to be concentrating on the shallows near shore, not the center of the lake so much. Okay, I hooked my first fish on the lake today. Okay. Okay. First brown trout today. This is a new lake to me, and so there's a certain way I go about exploring lakes that are new. I don't know any hot spots yet, so the first part of what I'm doing is exploration, not a fish. So to have a plan for lakes, to fish lakes well, you have to kind of understand lakes. Oh, this guy took the leech as well. Same size as his buddy, the last guy. Oh, it's got the fly wrapped up in the net a bit. Got it. Okay, hold on, bud. I want it out of you. As bad as you want it out of you. And there he goes. Okay, what I was getting at before, understanding the ecology of the lake will help you be successful. So the first thing you have to understand is that the food chain in a lake begins with the sun. Sun penetrates the water. The sunshine penetrating the water allows for plant and algae growth. The plant and algae growth supplies shelter and food for prey items for trout, and they also shelter young trout and allows them the ability to grow older because it helps them hide from their larger kin who would eat them if they had the chance. So weed growth is important. It's where the food is. It's where shelter is. And as such, as I said, it starts with the sun and where weeds grow. Now, sun, as it hits water, the water diffuses a lot of the sunlight at the surface, and that same kind of diffusion and diminishing effect happens the deeper you go. So the place that gets the most sun and the most ability to grow weeds and other aquatic vegetation, which then in turn invites aquatic insects and bait fish and other food items for the trout, happens in shallower water. And shallower water is also the water that heats up fastest. It's when these lakes ice over. It's the areas that will come out of ice first, because it's easier for the sun to penetrate and for the water to warm there. And as a result, these areas are the top spot to look for trout. Now, while you're tooling around, what I generally do is I'll tool around with a leech. And what I'm doing is I don't want to look at the center of the lake so much, because the feeding areas are on the shorelines, near shorelines. So I'll cruise around the periphery of the lake, dragging a leech. And while I go, I'm being observant. I'm looking for weed beds. Weed beds hold food and they hold fish. The other thing I'm looking for is I'm keeping a keen eye out on the water, looking for any signs of insect hatches, because a lot of times, like with chironomid hatches, you'll find the husks from the previous day's hatch on the surface. And if you can look at those a little closer, you can understand what size chironomid that you'll want to fish and what color. All of that's helpful. Or you may cruise along the shoreline and see that there are a ton of dragonfly husks up on the reeds where they crawled out of the water, or damselfly husks. And these will tell you what's going on and what the fish might be keying on. So it's important to work the edges, to work slow. That's why I troll a leech, is I can cover ground with that, and I can cover the lake fairly quickly, go around the edges and see what's there. I got my leech tangled in me on my flipper. Okay. So that's tactic one for exploration. And of course, what comes next is trying to determine what the fish are eating. Now, fish almost never turn down a Snickers bar, which is what a leech is. It's a fairly large food item that's slow and oh my hook's already bent. I'll bend that back into shape. So you can't go wrong very often with a leech. There may be other things that are happening. There may be a large hatch of chironomids or mayflies, and you'll be able to see that. Usually fish will start rising, and that'll be your cue that maybe you should get off the leech and try something else. But until that happens, start with a leech, find out what the lake looks like, where the fish are likely to be holding, and work from there. Okay, this guy's straightened out again. Hook is straightened. You wouldn't think a 14-inch fish could do much to a hook, but oh, they did. All right, and off I go again. Here's one. Not for long. He's not, I haven't hooked anything that really feels large yet. So when I'm exploring like this, I generally like to have two flies out, just to double your chances maybe of hooking something. And with the second flies, like I said, I'm always going to use a leech when I'm doing this. What I may use for the second fly, like I said, the most common insect hatching in the spring is the black chironomid. It's found in lakes all over this state. But another option, I could have just as easily have put on a bloodworm and made that the second fly in this rig. But always at the bottom, a leech. Okay, so far from what I've seen, this little cove back in here has been the hot spot. Like I said, 8 strikes in the first pass, just through this little U shape that I've done. I'm about to run past the reedy shoreline here and get into boulder field, and I don't know what's going to hold in that. If that's going to be like a waste area, the desert. And this is the oasis end. This is definitely food production down here. You know that. I don't know what these big boulders, this kind of shift that's come off the cliff face over here. Not exactly a cliff. It's a fairly steep. Fairly steep little mountain right here. There's a fish. Oh, let's see if it stays on. He's fighting a little harder than what I've hit so far. Any bigger? Or just more moxie? A little bit bigger, maybe. These fish are interesting. These are, oh, so nice. Let's take a look at this guy. Oh. Okay. Now he's not buttery yellow, he's more silvery. His spot pattern is, it's not super heavy spotted like you'll see with Montana fish. This is more like a British fish with just, light spotting. But he's got the red spots that I love, especially like right through this line here. Beautiful little fish. He's probably 15, skinny 15. I think he'll measure to that. Nope, he's 14. No, maybe even 13. I like him though. Cute, colorful. Let him go. And off he goes. So let's see if we can get back to it. When it comes to fishing reedy areas like this, notice this whole cove is ringed in reeds, and there are weed beds in through here. Now, as I turn and go up this way, you'll notice that the shoreline is very rocky, drops off steeply. I don't know if those rocks are going to hold as many fish. I'm going to give it a shot. I'm exploring, so I might as well find out. Who knows, maybe the bigger fish are holding in the rocky areas. Don't know. But if I were betting money, which I'm not, my bet would be in this shallow end of the lake over here, that most of the fish will be in the reedy areas against these reeds are hiding places for insects and other food items. So weed beds are green, and green is money, so keep that in mind. Okay, while we're cruising along here, the other thing about lakes is time of year, seasons of a lake. Now, I'm going to bet this lake and many eastern Washington lakes in the wintertime are frozen over. I think a lot of them, essentially fishing is done sometime in November. That's probably when the first ice hits. And probably doesn't start again until mid to late March when the ice starts coming off. I'm here in early April, so it's very early in the season. The insect hatches haven't really started going gangbusters yet. That'll probably happen later in the next 2 weeks or so. It'll warm up, the water will warm some, insects will start hatching, and the peaks for most lakes are late April through early June, and that's when most of the insect activity happens, when you get your biggest chironomid hatches. The mayfly hatches, Callibates mayflies start hatching at the same time. May is when dragonflies start hatching out. They'll make a migration to the shoreline and climb up on these reeds and shuck their husks and emerge as adults, dry their wings, and take off. Damselflies do the same thing. And so that's all gangbuster time. And as I said before, right now I'm going to guess the water here is in the 40s, probably low 40s. So the fish are not super aggressive. They'll get more aggressive when the water hits the 50s. But the other thing about, like, as we get into May, start transitioning into June, is that the areas that warm first, that at first throughout the year attract fish and start the hatches early because they warm the water in the shallows first, it pulls the fish into those areas. As we get into summer, those areas heat up to the point where they can barely hold oxygen. They're too warm for the fish, and the fish won't be there. So as we transition into summertime, what you'll be seeing is that during the day, the fish are going to seek out the deeper water in the lake. They're probably not going to do a lot of feeding. Fish are always opportunists. If they can find a little bit of food while they're trying to stay in the oxygenated water, the colder water in the middle of the lake and the deeper spots in the lake, then they will, but they're not actively looking for food. So what they will do is, as I mentioned before, the food chain starts in the shallows. In the summertime, they'll continue to feed in the shallows, but they won't come up into the shallows until the dead of night, say like 2 a.m., up until the wee hours of the morning when the sun starts again striking the water. So once, they'll feed probably, they'll come into the shallows once it's cooled down in the summertime at night. They'll cruise through, they'll be feeding. That'll go on until the sun hits the water at an angle that it starts warming the shallows again, and then it's back to the deep areas in the lake so they can take a break from the heat, and that's where the oxygenated water is. Colder water holds more oxygen. Then as we get into fall, starting probably about mid-September or so, where the days are shorter and the water starts to cool again, the fish will be more likely to come back and feed during the day in the shallows. And then as we get into October and November, the end of it, they'll spend a lot of time in the shallows trying to fatten up before winter sets in. And everything doesn't come to a dramatic close in winter. There's still some opportunities, but the water's super cold, the fish are lethargic, the food chain kind of shuts down when the ice comes over the lake. So they're not as aggressive, they don't feed as much. It's more opportunism than anything else. And again, in that case, the warmer and safer water, again, is in the deep areas of the lake, because just as shallow areas of the lake warm up first, they also get colder first. So when winter strikes and there's not a lot of sunshine to keep pumping energy into the system and warm things up, what'll happen is fish will start abandoning the shallows again when things ice up, because that's the first place that gets frozen. So the time of year kind of tells you where you're going to go, what you're going to do. Fishing in the summertime is, I generally won't do it on lakes because the water's warm enough that it winds up stressing the fish if you catch them during that. And I don't do much fishing at night, so the prime time on lakes is spring, from about ice out till about early June, depending on elevation. Higher lakes you may be able to go longer on. And then starting mid-September until ice out again, that's the other hot point in the season on lakes. Somebody's on. he's giving me a bit of a tussle. I don't think he's any bigger though. Okay, he hit the black leech. As you can see, we got quite a little tangle going. Spots. No red spots on this guy. Not really buttery either. I'm getting pushed by the wind, so we get to refish this water again. Let this guy go. Oh, there he goes. Oh, that feels big. Oh, that guy's fighting. You're kidding me. That had the feel of a monster. I thought he was going to go rip the line off the reel. He doesn't look much bigger than the other guys I've been catching. He just toughens. Well, see what I mean about being nice and fat? I mean, he's fat. It's not a starvation life by any means. But I keep waiting for the big boy. Here's one. Shaker. He might be bigger than some of these others. Maybe. I think that was the lens. Any color on you? I thought I saw red spots on you. Alright. You're skinnier than the last guy I caught. There, bring you around. Okay. Okay, there he is. All right. He's gone before we can see those lovely little red spots on him. That wasn't bad, though. I'll take that. There's one. Okay, I think that's a sign. This will be the point where I have some strength, I'll tell you. 14 inches. That's what all of them have been. They've all been like that. So I'm wondering about this. Seems like maybe what's happened here is that we've had 0 holdovers. That trout didn't fare well this winter, because you'd expect some 18 inchers, and they're not here. Okay, you gotta leave him here. I would like a good look at this guy. He's got the spots. He's got his red dots on. Get my hands wet. Pick him up. Look at those red spots. Now he's skinny, but I think he's a male. And he's carrying the red spots. That's just a beautiful little fish. Oh, there he goes. Happy to not see me anymore. All right, we're going to go to claret. And the only reason I'm doing that is because I've never fished claret colored leech before. My feeling on it is who knows, maybe fish love claret leeches. And I should have been fishing these years ago. Who can really tell? Well, I won, so I'm going to fish one. And we'll find out if fish go gaga over it, or if I don't even get a touch, which is a possibility. All right, I have to be patient with me while I take a minute or two to thread this sucker in and get her tied up. The claret leech. Now we will see how that fishes, if it does. So 2 fish on the first pass here, and I would love it if I had 2 or more hits for this. Although the water's been worked once, so let's see. By and large, there's one. Okay, they like claret. Claret works. By and large, all my fish, except one, which was on the black, and this one, on the claret, have been on the olive. I wonder if I come back in the fall, if these will all be 16, 17-inch fish. Oh, he got off. Good for you, buddy. There's another one. Why do these guys fight? They fight hard. They aren't aerial, but my God, do they struggle. Every time you hook one of these things, you swear to God you hooked a bigger fish than it is. Every time it's 13 or 14, and every time it feels like it's 16, 18. There's one. Okay. I gotta say rah-rah for claret. That's the fourth fish that's hit on the claret. Oh man, he's giving it everything to try and get that thing out. All right, buddy, come on up. Male, female, spots, no spots. All right. Seeing as you like that claret so much, I think I'll be using it down on whatever lake that is, hoping to catch a tiger trout. Hoping they have the same instincts you do. Okay, we'll bring you around. Oh, here we go. All right, here's my little friend. He's got some spots on him. Some little red spots, but they're not vivid like some of the others. That's not bad, though. That's a nice little fish. There he goes. Goodbye, buddy.